You can't kill the boogeyman. Halloween, 1978, wasn't just another low-budget horror flick. It was a cultural earthquake that redefined fear on screen. Behind the camera, chaos brewed. Malfunctioning props, actors nearly injured, last-minute rewrites, and shoestring budgets forcing desperate improvisations. Every scream you heard had a story behind it, some more terrifying than the movie itself. Today, we're pulling the mask off. These are 20 weird facts about Halloween that will make you see the film in an entirely new light. And stick around, because the bonus fact is the most chilling of all, a secret hidden for decades. Let's dive in. The mask that wasn't supposed to exist. The face of Michael Myers almost never existed. The crew, strapped for cash, bought the cheapest mask they could find at a Hollywood costume shop, a William Shatner Star Trek mask. Production designer Tommy Lee Wallace widened the eyes, ripped off the eyebrows, and spray painted it ghostly white. The result? A blank, soulless stare that terrified audiences. What's wild is that nobody expected it to work. Carpenter himself admitted it looked creepy in ways we couldn't explain. Ironically, the mask cost just over $1, yet it became the most iconic symbol in horror history. Not a monster, not a demon, just a hollow face staring back. Sometimes accidents create legends. A movie made in just 20 days. You might think Halloween was a carefully orchestrated production. It wasn't. The entire film was shot in just 20 days, with most scenes captured in only 1 or 2 takes. The budget? A meager $325,000. That meant no elaborate set pieces, no luxury for reshoots, and certainly no safety net. Carpenter and his crew had to get creative, borrowing equipment, using rented homes, even moving potted plants around to fake autumn in sunny California. The speed gave the movie a raw energy. It wasn't polished Hollywood. It was guerrilla filmmaking. And that urgency bleeds into every frame, creating the frantic, claustrophobic tension that made the movie timeless. Jamie Lee Curtis was paid peanuts. Jamie Lee Curtis was a virtual unknown when she landed the role of Laurie Strode. Her paycheck? A mere $8,000. That's less than most modern-day extras make. She was only 19 years old, the daughter of Hollywood royalty Janet Leigh, but Carpenter cast her partly for that very reason. It gave the film extra publicity. What audiences didn't know was how nervous Curtis was. She feared she'd ruin her career before it even started. Instead, her scream, her terror, and her innocence defined the final girl archetype. What was supposed to be a cheap gig transformed her into the scream queen of a generation. The pumpkin problem. Here's the kicker. Halloween was filmed in California during spring. That meant no crisp autumn leaves, no orange trees, and definitely no pumpkins. The crew scrambled to find a single pumpkin for the opening shot. It was reused in multiple scenes, sometimes hollowed out, sometimes just repositioned. Carpenter later admitted the leaves you see blowing across the street, they weren't real. They were hand-painted paper leaves that had to be collected after every take and reused. What you see as fall in the film was nothing more than smoke, mirrors, and sheer determination. Not October, but pure illusion. Michael Myers' heavy breathing was a crew member. One of the most unsettling sounds in Halloween is Michael Myers' deep, ragged breathing behind the mask. Audiences thought it was Nick Castle, the actor playing Myers. It wasn't. In fact, it was post-production sound added by Carpenter himself, recorded in a small booth with a simple microphone. The effect was accidental genius. That heavy, mechanical breathing gave Myers an almost inhuman presence, like a predator just beyond your reach. What's eerie is how simple it was to create. A man breathing into a mic, looped over scenes of violence. Sometimes the smallest sound is scarier than the loudest scream. Donald Pleasance almost didn't take the role. Dr. Loomis is the moral compass of Halloween, the only one who truly understands the evil behind Michael Myers. But Donald Pleasance nearly walked away. He wasn't interested in the script at first, dismissing it as just another horror film. What changed his mind? Carpenter wrote him a heartfelt letter, and his daughter, who loved Carpenter's music, encouraged him to take the role. Pleasance agreed, for $20,000 and only 5 days of shooting. His gravitas elevated the movie. Without his chilling lines, the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes, the film might have been just another slasher. Instead, it became mythology. The knife wasn't always real. When Michael Myers stalked Laurie with his infamous butcher knife, safety was a constant concern. The crew couldn't afford high-tech props, so they switched between a real kitchen knife and a plastic stand-in depending on the angle. Jamie Lee Curtis later revealed that sometimes she couldn't tell which was which during takes, making her terror genuine. The budget forced risk, and that danger seeped into the film's DNA. Audiences watching saw a blade gleaming under dim light. What they didn't see was an actress never quite sure if her co-star was holding plastic or steel. The original title was different. Believe it or not, Halloween almost wasn't called Halloween. The working title was The Babysitter Murders. It was producer Irwin Yablans who insisted on renaming it, tying the horror to a single night everyone recognized. That simple shift transformed the film's identity. The Babysitter Murders sounded like a cheap drive-in thriller. Halloween sounded primal, cultural, inevitable. It wasn't just about one girl or one killer. It was about a date on the calendar that everyone feared might not be safe. A one-word title created a legend. Sometimes branding is the deadliest weapon of all. The famous score was an afterthought. John Carpenter didn't just direct Halloween, he also composed its now iconic score in only a few days. At first, test audiences weren't scared of the movie at all. Carpenter realized it needed something extra. Using a borrowed synthesizer, he built a theme based on 5/4 time, an odd rhythm his father had taught him on the piano. The result was unsettling, jagged, and hypnotic. That eerie repetition turned a cheap indie into a nightmare machine. Without the music, Halloween might have been forgettable. With it, Michael Myers became unstoppable. The score didn't just accompany the terror. It was the terror, the police car mix-up. During filming, the production couldn't afford multiple police cars. They had to reuse the same one for different scenes, repainting it and slapping on different decals. But continuity errors slipped through. In one scene, eagle-eyed fans spotted mismatched logos, revealing the low-budget trickery. The irony? Viewers weren't supposed to notice. Yet fans later celebrated these mistakes as part of the film's charm. What was once a desperate shortcut became cult trivia. And here's where I remind you, go ahead and like and subscribe because this is just the halfway point, and the facts only get wilder from here. Nick Castle wasn't supposed to be Michael Myers. Nick Castle, the man behind the mask, wasn't even an actor. He was a friend of John Carpenter's who stopped by the set just to hang out. Carpenter asked him to throw on the mask and jumpsuit for a few shots, and Castle became the Shape. Paid just $25 a day, he brought an eerie stillness to the role by moving slowly and deliberately. That calm presence contrasted sharply with the chaos on screen, making Michael Myers feel otherworldly. Ironically, a man who never auditioned became the face of terror for generations, not cast, but destined. Jamie Lee Curtis picked Laurie's clothes. The production's tiny budget didn't allow for professional costume designers. Jamie Lee Curtis had to shop for Laurie Strode's wardrobe at JCPenney, spending less than $100. She chose simple blouses, sweaters, and modest skirts to emphasize Laurie's innocence. Carpenter believed the plain look would make her more relatable to audiences. What's fascinating is how those clothes became iconic. The pastel tones and neat appearance turned Laurie into the archetypal good girl of horror, an image later copied endlessly in slasher films. A teenager's department store haul became cinematic history. The opening POV shot was revolutionary. The film's opening, a long, unbroken point of view shot through young Michael's eyes, was groundbreaking. Using a panelized camera rig, Carpenter created a fluid, first-person perspective that was rare at the time. The shot took multiple attempts, requiring precise timing from actors and crew. What audiences didn't realize was how experimental it was. This wasn't polished studio equipment, but new technology pushed to its limits. That single shot placed viewers inside the killer's head, forcing them to witness horror from a perspective they couldn't escape. It wasn't just an opening, it was an invasion. John Carpenter only got $10,000. Despite directing, writing, and scoring the film, Carpenter was paid just $10,000 plus a small percentage of profits. At the time, he didn't care. He was thrilled to direct his first feature with total creative control. But when the movie became a massive hit, grossing over $70 million worldwide, Carpenter realized he had essentially given away one of the most profitable deals in horror history. What audiences see as a masterpiece of indie filmmaking was, behind the scenes, also a story of Hollywood undervaluing its creators. Not fortune, but freedom. The fake blood was minimal. Unlike later slasher films, Halloween used very little blood. Carpenter deliberately avoided gore, believing tension and atmosphere were scarier than explicit violence. The budget also forced this choice. Fake blood cost money, and the crew couldn't afford elaborate effects. Instead, Carpenter used shadows, music, and suggestion. Audiences swore they saw more brutality than was actually on screen. The mind filled in the blanks. What wasn't shown became more terrifying than what was. It wasn't about splatter. It was about suspense. A decision born of necessity became the film's greatest strength. Fact 16. The entire film was lit with creativity, not money. Cinematographer Dean Cundey had almost no budget for fancy lighting rigs. Instead, he relied on ingenuity. He used shadows and practical lights inside the houses to create atmosphere, making Michael Myers fade in and out of darkness. One of the most famous shots, Michael's mask slowly appearing from the shadows behind Laurie, was achieved with a dimmer switch and a single light. No big-budget trickery, just pure artistry. That look, born of constraint, defined the slasher genre's visual language. Not Hollywood gloss, but independent grit. The Myers house was real and filthy. The infamous Myers house wasn't a set. It was a real abandoned house in South Pasadena, California. When the crew first entered, it was falling apart, filled with dirt, trash, and broken furniture. They cleaned only the rooms needed for filming, leaving the rest in ruin. To make the before scenes work, they even had to repaint and redecorate it, then restore it to disarray later. The house wasn't haunted, but its decaying walls, creaking floors, and eerie silence made it feel like it was. Horror wasn't built on a soundstage. It was already there. The actors wore their own clothes. Just like Jamie Lee Curtis buying Laurie's outfits, most of the cast supplied their own costumes. PJ Soles wore her own bell-bottoms. Nancy Loomis wore her own casual wear. The tiny budget forced everyone to pitch in, blurring the line between actor and character. Carpenter liked the authenticity. It made the teens feel real, like people you'd actually see in a small-town neighborhood. That realism made the violence more shocking. Audiences weren't watching polished Hollywood glamour. They were watching people who looked like their neighbors, or themselves. Michael Myers' walk was carefully designed. Nick Castle wasn't told to play Michael Myers with emotion. In fact, Carpenter's only instruction was to move like a man who doesn't belong in this world. Castle developed a slow, steady, almost robotic walk. No running, no rushing, just inevitability. That deliberate pace became one of the most terrifying aspects of the character. Audiences realized you can run, but you can't escape something that never stops. Not speed, but persistence. That inhuman patience made Michael Myers scarier than any fast-moving monster ever could. The film was originally rated X. When Carpenter first submitted Halloween to the MPAA, the board nearly slapped it with an X rating. Not because of gore, there wasn't much, but because of sheer intensity. The relentless stalking, the suggestive violence, and the unrelenting suspense pushed boundaries. Carpenter had to argue and cut small moments of brutality to secure an R rating. Imagine that. One of the tamest slashers by modern standards was once considered too extreme. It shows how much Halloween shattered expectations in 1978. What audiences didn't know was just how close it came to being censored out of existence. The ending almost revealed too much. Here's the one fact that chills even die-hard fans. Carpenter originally considered showing Michael Myers' body after his fall, motionless, finished. But he changed his mind. Instead, he let Myers vanish, leaving only his ragged breathing over shots of empty suburban streets. That ambiguity turned the story from a simple horror film into a myth. Evil wasn't defeated. It was still out there, waiting. Carpenter later said, "I wanted to make the audience feel like they weren't safe anywhere." And it worked. The boogeyman became immortal, not in special effects, but in imagination. Halloween 1978 was never meant to become the legend it is. It was made on scraps, filmed in a rush, with actors wearing their own clothes and sets held together by tape and hope. Yet from those limitations came greatness. It redefined horror, launched a franchise, and left behind a legacy of fear that still lingers today. So, next time you hear those sharp piano notes, remember, behind every frame was chaos, risk, and genius. And the scariest part? The mask never really came off. If you loved uncovering these secrets, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Because in the world of movies, just like in Halloween, there's always something waiting in the shadows.